This Michigan team has put themselves on a really elite pedestal, and good on them. That game, obviously, on Saturday night didn't mean much. I thought before kick, I was telling teams, in fact, a couple of the coaches for Michigan said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, I don't really think it matters what happens tonight. You guys are going to be the number 2 seed. TCU had already lost. I have already made up my mind before this weekend's games that Ohio State was going to be ahead of Alabama. And it's not just me, by the way. The committee did. The committee decided that Ohio State was going to be ahead of Alabama. And once USC lost and then TCU lost, Ohio State wasn't necessarily ever going to pass TCU. So I thought that the seeding was done before Michigan ever kicked off. But they go out there and they win the Big Ten title, and they get to a point that they've never gotten to before in their history, which is 13-0. They were obviously excited about it. But I will tell you that this Michigan team, even during the course of this season, has evolved a little bit. Michigan's 25-2 since the start of last season. That's the second best record to Georgia in all of college football. And yet we've seen different styles from them, albeit little nuances, okay? You're not going to see a drastic change in their style, but a little bit of difference. You see, when Blake Corum was their running back, before he got injured, I kept saying all year on this show, and I know that you guys that listen and Michigan fans, thank you for all the kind words during the course of the weekend in Indianapolis. But you kept asking me, like, how about our 7th gear now? And the reason that they would say that is because I said all year, Michigan has a great 4th and 5th gear, but I don't know if they can go to 6th or 7th gear like Ohio State can, because I've seen Ohio State kind of go to the stratosphere. Now, when Blake Corum went down, I was very nervous for Michigan because their whole MO was about that steady run game, and he was going to give you 4 or 5 on every single carry. In fact, against Nebraska, he had a long of 12 and went well over 100 yards and averaged 5 yards per carry in that game. Okay, so like he was just a 4, 5, 6 yard machine. Now, it's not quite that way anymore. Now, are they more explosive? Yes. And that was proven out against Ohio State last week, and then even against Purdue in the Big Ten championship game. But what is a little bit different is that with Donovan Edwards now as their featured back, what I would say is they have a bit more of the 1s and 2s and 3s, and then they also have the ability to hit the home run now. So it's a little bit more inconsistent, although in the end, you look up and it's like, well, they do what they always do. Yeah, but it just feels a little bit different because Purdue was actually stopping them for a time on some 1s and 2s, you know, and forcing J.J. McCarthy to make plays with his legs and his arm. He did, by the way, and he continues to grow and play much better at the quarterback position. But this is a team now that needs that to be a little bit more aggressive with J.J. McCarthy. Now they need some of those explosive runs from Donovan Edwards because they're not just going to methodically go down the field with the 4s and 5s and 6s that they did with Blake Corum. So their offense, although not drastic, has changed a little bit. Defensively, they haven't necessarily evolved, but I think they've just, I would say, come into their own. I've said for a long time during the course of this year, hey, this defense might be better than a year ago. And the statistics bear that out, by the way. They're better in most categories than they were a year ago. And it's hard for people to really wrap their heads around that. And the reason is that you can clearly look at the personnel last year and say that the personnel last year was superior to what they're playing with this year. Aiden Hutchinson was a top 5 pick on the defensive end outside linebacker. David Ojabo was going to be a first-round pick, probably in the top 15 before he tore his Achilles in that pro day incident. He was on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. So, bam, you got those hard edges. You also have a first-round nickelback in Daxton Hill. It was a very, very good defense, obviously. Now, statistically, they've actually taken a step up. This is a defense that has gotten a little bit better, even with sack numbers without those great edge rushers, Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo. It's quite amazing. Because they're doing it really with a number of different pass rushers, a rotation of pass rushers. And to me, that's been more oppressive. Now what they have is a group of players that might not have the star potential, but is playing really well as a group together. Now, we've seen them dominate at times and rush the quarterback, and their sack numbers are decent. But what they have now kind of evolved into here at the back half of the season, and really the last 2 weeks more specifically, is a defense that plays kind of a bend, don't break style of defense, right? You can gain some yards in the middle of the field against Michigan, but they're outstanding in the red zone. Outstanding. In their last 10 possessions that have gone into the red zone as a defense, they've only allowed 2 touchdowns. In fact, on the year, they're the number 3 defense in all of college football in terms of touchdown percentage in the red zone. They do a great job once the field is condensed. Okay, so they might not have the edge rushers that they did a year ago to create some stops all the way during the course of the drive. Purdue had a few different drives that were 10 plays or more. But once the field is condensed and you can't exploit those zone coverages, and then the quarterback has to hold the ball just an extra beat, just a smidge of an extra beat, now the pass rush can get there. And what you saw, in particular against Purdue, and then at times against Ohio State in the week previous, was the fact that the pass rush would show up and then they would get off the field and force a field goal. All right, well, I mean, listen, that's nothing to scoff at. In a large sense, that's the way the Patriots were winning Super Bowls in Tom Brady's last few years there. Bend, don't break style of defense, not necessarily a star defensively, but certainly a group that knows how to get out there and get stops in the red zone. There is a star emerging, though, and that's the guy that you just saw in that highlight at the top of the show. Will Johnson is emerging as an absolute stud on this team for Michigan at the corner position. And he's now their best corner. He's probably the most talented defender. And when you look around the team, what you see is a lot of first or second year players that are the best players on the team. Donovan Edwards and J.J. McCarthy, Colston Loveland at tight end, Mason Graham on the interior of the defensive line and defensive tackle. Will Johnson was in there. Rolder, the linebacker, he gets in there. There's a lot of those types of players out there, young cats that are playing really well. So this is a team that's only going to get better next year. And now here they are as the number 2 seed, looking to potentially, beat TCU and get to a national championship game. Speaking of TCU, let's take a look at those Horned Frogs. When I look at them, it's not so much about the way I'm evaluating them as much as I was really disappointed, for them, for a guy like Max Duggan, that they weren't able to get that extra yard, punch it in, and potentially win that Big 12 title. It's not that I was rooting for them over Kansas State, because I wasn't. And I love Chris Klieman, and he's done a marvelous job with Will Howard and the Cats and Deuce Vaughn. I love those guys, right? It's because that ending sequence for TCU in that game is going to eat at them forever. Forever. Max Duggan was sensational during the course of that game, with Caleb Williams losing on Friday night and getting banged up, by the way, in the process. There was this crack in the door to potentially creep in and win the Heisman Trophy for Max Duggan. And for a large part of that game, it was like, okay, it's probably not going to happen. But then he did what Max Duggan does, and he started willing his team to a victory. Willing them down the field. One of those touchdown drives, he willed them down the field so much on all those long yardage conversions, running the football himself, he could not breathe. Like, he was totally spent. The guy put it all on the line in that Big 12 championship game, which is what makes the ending sequence so disappointing. So disappointing. As an analyst and someone that doesn't have a dog in the fight, what you want is for someone to go down with their best. And at 3rd and goal inside the 1 yard line, I'm screaming at the television, sneak, quarterback sneak. J.J. Watt probably is yelling sneak. He tweeted out, by the way, quarterback sneak is the single most difficult play to stop for 1 yard or less, without a doubt, especially when you add pushers from behind, which is now legal, into the equation. We'll never understand taking the ball 5+ yards away from the line of scrimmage to try and gain 1 yard at any level. That's J.J. Watt. That's an NFL Defensive Player of the Year. That's a guy that has made a career out of trying to stop things like this. And again, he says it right there in the tweet, especially when you have pushers from behind that are now legal. Bush push is legal now. And it's 3rd down, and it's the 1 yard line. And Kansas State didn't even cover up the 3 interior offensive linemen. There was a little bubble there. That should have been a sneak all day long. And even if you're not going to sneak it, the ball has to be in Max Duggan's hands. If you're not going to sneak it, then it has to be some sort of read where Max can make the decision of whether he's going to hand it or he's going to give it, putting some edge player in conflict. Those are really the only 2 options, but they decide to go old traditional and reverse out and try to slam the running back into there, and they didn't get it on both of their last 2 snaps, 3rd down or 4th down. Great hold for Kansas State. Good on you, and you deserve to win when you can do that. The disappointing part is that Garrett Riley, as good as he is as an offensive coordinator, and make no mistake about it, he's a brilliant young offensive coordinator, and he's going to have a heck of a career in this business. But this is one of those, as a young guy, he's going to learn from. And this was a development moment for a young play caller in probably one of the biggest situations that he's ever had to call plays in his life. And he's going to learn that it's like, I don't have to go to my play sheet. The hunch is correct. Just sneak the ball in. And the fact remains is that Max Duggan willed his team back into the game, willed his team to overtime, and then didn't have an opportunity to win it. That's not going to set right with Frog fans. It's not going to set right with Garrett Riley. It's not going to set right with Max Duggan. And by the way, if Max Duggan propels himself in there, brings him all the way back, scores the touchdown, you never know. That could have been a Heisman moment touchdown for him, even on a quarterback sneak, because it would have been the moment that kid, after all the adversity that he's been through, would have willed his team to a championship and a for sure playoff berth. Now, they're still going to the playoff. But that was a missed opportunity for TCU.